Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today in the Battery Energy Storage Supply Chain Opportunities webinar. This webinar is hosted by the Alliance for Manufacturing and Technology in partnership with New York BESS. I'm Carol Miller, the Executive Director at AMT. I will be today's moderator. This webinar will be recorded and a link to the webinar will be available on our website at amt-mep.org. If you have any questions anytime during the presentation, please feel free to use the question and answer function on the webinar screen. You can type in your question, or if you'd like, just indicate that you have a question and I can unmute you. We'll address the questions as we go along and at the end. Today, this is our supply chain team from New York BESS. We have John Cerveny, Bill Acker, Brendan Whitman, and Carly Dupuis. And we have a great team. New York BESS mission is to catalyze and grow the energy storage industry and establish New York State as a global leader in advancing energy storage as a key solution for our clean energy future. From AMT, Ray Strauss, and AMT's mission is to provide cost-effective technical and business services to help small to mid-sized manufacturers become more productive, profitable, and competitive. We're part of the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program and the New York MEP. And Ray Strauss is a principal consultant with our organization. Our agenda today is we'll be providing an overview of New Energy New York. We'll be talking about the battery market opportunities, NENY, New Energy New York supply chain team objectives, as well as the battery and energy storage systems and what makes them up, the supply chain database that's in process, and we'll be sharing assistance and available resources, and then we'll be discussing next steps. The New Energy New York initiative is one of 21 winning proposals out of a total of 529 different projects that were proposed. It's part of the EDA Build Back Better Challenge. The challenge is aimed at transforming economically depressed communities through substantial investment in regional growth clusters. The project is led by Binghamton University and is focused on establishing an American hub for battery innovation, manufacturing, and workforce development in the Southern Tier and in New York and in North America. There's 5 different elements that are part of the initiative. Battery New York, as Technology and Manufacturing Center, is hosted by Binghamton University. It is part of the Heron campus in Endicott, and its objective is to develop and enable the advanced manufacturing and battery technologies and establish a robust manufacturing infrastructure to support the battery industry and its supply chain. The second initiative is what we're here to talk about today, which is the supply chain development to support the rapid growth of energy storage projects and increasing demand for a strong and qualified supply chain, which is the primary focus of today's session. Workforce development. This project will develop a host of coordinated and innovative programs throughout the supported region for the training of the workforce required to support the storage manufacturing ecosystem. The fourth element is equity and justice, collaborating with the community-based organizations to address and secure support for barriers, securing housing, childcare, transportation. These are critical components to the other pillars of the NENY and is integral to our success. The last component is the project is related to innovation and entrepreneurship. This project is to establish New York as a premier destination for realizing energy storage technologies and startups from prototyping to scale up to manufacturing. The Build Back Better Award for Binghamton University and the coalition was $63 million from EDA and $50 million from New York State. And the program is made possible by a coalition of 16 members that are listed here on the screen. And that is an overview of the program, and I'd like to turn it over to John Cerveny from New York BESS to review the market and growth of the battery industry. So John, if you would be so kind.
Great. Thanks so much, Carol. Just let me start by saying what great partners we've found in this program, as you see in the coalition represented, and in particular with AMT. Super knowledge base. Just been a real pleasure to work with Carol and Ray and the rest of the team there. We're here really to talk about, though, today, the energy storage opportunities, batteries and energy storage. And the next couple of slides are just a couple of examples of projections that have been made. So if the battery market is growing at a pretty much unprecedented pace. What we're really talking about here, and the reason for this growth worldwide, is that you have simultaneous transformation of both the transportation industry, so the kind of the green bars at the bottom there stack up to all of the batteries that go into vehicles of all kinds, including micromobility, heavy duty, plug-in hybrids, battery electric vehicles, all of that whole span across all kinds of application areas, including notably for our region, Raymond and things like forklifts, BA systems and buses. So there are end uses for these applications right in the southern tier. What this chart shows, though, is this really amazing growth that's happening across the world. The small gray bar, which were the green not here, that would be growing impressively on its own, but that represents stationary storage, and we're going to go into some depth on stationary energy storage examples later in the presentation. So the next chart, please. This one, the left side, kind of is a different source, but the same story about the growth in demand for lithium-ion batteries between now and 2030. The right side of the chart shows the known and announced capacity expansions that are going on worldwide. And what you'll see is that, although the scale doesn't really show it, the 2912 production capacity that's expected by 2030 does not meet the demand that we know to be there, or that we expect to be there. This gives us a lot of the sense that some of the projects that are announced probably won't be built or will be delayed. But the fundamental story here is, even with all of the huge announcements that have happened, there's still great opportunity for growth in this space and for new starts. So in the next slide, you see some of the investments that have been made in the US relative to lithium-ion batteries and supporting infrastructure, active materials components, battery-grade materials, raw materials, all of the things that add up to an ecosystem, to a supply chain for making batteries. And in a moment, we'll talk more about the supply chain that we're focused on here in New York. We don't have lithium deposits in the ground, so that circle is never going to appear here in our space. However, processing facilities do exist, and there's opportunities for more. And in particular, our interests around building a supply chain for energy storage systems. So everything that goes into the system that you would see as part of a large stationary energy storage installation is really an area where New York has some incredible strength, some strong players, very strong market demand, and really good opportunity. So we'll talk more about that as we go. In the supply chain program that I lead along with the team here, we have a number of objectives that we, as we wrote the proposal and looked at what we could and should do to strengthen our efforts around supply chain for batteries and energy storage. There's a number of objectives that rose to the top. One clearly is we need to know what it is. What are all the elements that add up to the battery and energy storage supply chain? And in particular, a lot of the materials and components are at the system level. And so we're doing a map of that. We've done a lot of work on our own as a team, We're also bringing in some consultants to help make sure we've really looked at it carefully and have everything represented. We will then have started on the other element here about identifying suppliers that are currently part of the supply chain. And importantly, and one of the reasons for this series of webinars, first of which is today, is to try to do some outreach and find companies who maybe do adjacent kind of work, but given some better information about what's going on with batteries in the energy storage space, could have the potential to enter this sector and to become a supplier in the battery space. So we as an organization, as a team, will be providing technical and program assistance to help companies make that transition. One of the things we've done and will continue to do is to facilitate relationships between existing and new entrants, identifying customers for the products, identifying suppliers for people who need a source of supply or maybe a second source. It's an interesting time for supply chain work in the US. There's clearly an increased focus and intent to build domestic supply chains, where in many cases in the past, we just looked for the low-cost supplier offshore. Onshoring, reshoring businesses is getting attention that it deserves. And I think one of the strengths of New York State and of the region is that we have so many manufacturing entities who have made an existence for a long time in various fields, who at one time maybe served some of the major manufacturing entities that are no longer in New York. IBM is a clear example, or in the way they were. So stitching together, finding those companies, finding where they have relevant resources and capabilities, and then bringing them into the supply chain for energy storage is kind of what we're all about. We will do some company attraction. So part of the team's effort will be attending trade shows and spreading the word about what's going on here and attracting companies in where we find gaps in particular. So if we don't have native New York-based companies, we will do some recruiting. And we certainly will be out there marketing the capabilities. So one of the efforts that we'll be exhibiting, we'll have a New York State booth at a trade show in the fall of 2024, a major battery trade show out in Michigan. And there'll be more to tell on that story soon. So next, please, Carol. Establish qualifications. So one of the things we learned and that we knew but heard in some detail as we were putting together the proposal about how to build the supply chain and the ways that we could be effective and helpful was that it takes a long time to find and qualify suppliers and sources of supply and materials and components. And so the intent in this second bullet is really about helping to shorten the amount of time it takes to become a supplier to some of the companies who need materials and components. And so we are standing up programs to do that, and there'll be, again, a lot more of information to come in the coming months. This battery cell scorecard program is one that we're investigating. There are a couple of resources out there that are published data about cells. For companies who use cells, those can be really effective ways to screen and decide which source of supply. We certainly want to make sure that our New York cell manufacturers are represented there, and we're working to make all that happen. And then third bullet, you'll hear more about this from one of my colleagues shortly, is about the supply chain database. I'm happy to announce that it is open for business on the intake side. So right now we're building the resource. Companies can go there, enter your information, and become part of that supply chain database. We will be going live and publishing the database for people to go and do searching very shortly. And I keep making it sound like things are about to happen. A lot has happened up to now. There's more to come. So next slide, please. This is a little bit of a graphic to show what's in the supply chain when we talk about it. There are all the things that go into making batteries and cells, materials production, materials processing, the cell manufacturing itself. Those go on to be made into packs and modules. And then you see a number of applications areas, So electric vehicles, stationary storage, defense applications, aviation, a whole host of application spaces that really require a lot of good cells, and in many cases you just can't find the domestic sourcing for those now. So we're working hard to help make that happen. Some of the company logos you see on the right are companies that are currently in New York and have operations roughly aligned with where they are in the supply chain. There are many more. This is kind of a representative showing of those companies. One thing I didn't mention at the bottom, end of life recycling and reuse. Li-Cycle up in Rochester is building both a hub and a spoke facility where they collect cells, and then at the hub facility turn that material into battery grade materials, which then goes back to the top of the chain here and gets fed in as a raw material. So there's a lot of exciting work happening in New York across the spectrum. Our job in many ways is to identify other pieces, other elements, and put those together. And in particular, we think the opportunity space around stationary storage is really strong. And in the next few slides, we'll get there. The next slide, though, this one is why. So, and this is really why energy storage for stationary storage. What's the need? As we electrify everything in the state, and in particular, EVs, the growth of EV deployment, electrified heat, there are new demands that will be put on the electric grid, and that stresses the grid in ways that it wasn't intended when it was built. Stationary energy storage can be one of the very strong solutions to strengthen the grid in the interim. So without building out new poles and wires, you can site storage to help serve applications that otherwise wouldn't be eligible, wouldn't be able to be served by the existing grid infrastructure. One example of that is co-deployment of a battery along with DC fast charging for electric vehicles. So there are already in the state a number of deployments that show where that solution, that EVs charging station coupled with batteries, can work in a location that otherwise you wouldn't be able to support fast charging. The other important element of this, kind of the slide here, is renewable energy. So the wind doesn't blow all the time, the sun doesn't shine all the time, but power demands are there all the time. And as you go to a higher and higher percentage of renewable deployment on the grid, the need for a leveling effect that you can get from batteries is extremely important. So as a state, we have very high need and very high targets for deployment of energy storage systems. The number recently increased from what was originally a 3 gigawatt target state roadmap activity that NYSERDA led, that has doubled now to 6 gigawatts by 2030. That's a huge deployment of storage. We're making good progress against that goal, but there's much more to be done, and it proves that New York is a great market for these devices. So our goal with this program in many ways is to help make that reach those goals with New York made product, and we'd love to help companies do that. I think I already touched on speed of deployment, and now I'll turn over to my colleague Brendan, who will come in and talk more about what's in that box, what makes up the stationary storage. So thanks, Brendan.
Thank you, John. Hi, everybody. I'm Brendan Whitman. I'm the Supply Chain Program Associate with New York BESS. And like John said, I'm going to be talking about what makes up the supply chain. So for the purpose of this webinar, we're going to be talking about large grid scale deployment, which you can see in the picture on the left is in these containerized systems. However, there are different forms of energy storage systems, such as residential deployment, which you can see on the right, which is plugged into the side of the house or in a garage and feeds into the home power system. Next slide. So here we have a visual of what the overview of a grid system looks like. So you have your standard cells, battery packs, which are comprised of those cells, and those go into the rack. In this image over to the right, you can see inside this containerized system, you've got the battery racks and stacks, the battery management system, and the power conversion system, which the grid and renewable power generation sources feed into. But it's not just those battery modules and stacks. You also have off-gas detection, fire suppression systems, and HVAC with multiple levels of BMS, which we'll go into later in the presentation. Next slide. So for those battery cells, the components of them are pretty similar depending on the chemistries, but it's the anode material, cathode material, electrolyte, separator, current collector, and battery casing. Those are put into different formats, the primary ones being cylindrical, prismatic, and pouch, each with their own different levels of power density and energy density, depending on the use that it's being put in for. Next slide. And then those cells are then put into battery modules and packs. And depending on who the manufacturer is, will depend on the different components that go into a battery module. But usually you'll see things such as bus bars, side strips, a BMS for the module level, and sensors for temperature and voltage sensing. Next slide. So these battery modules are then put into stacks, which you can see earlier in one of the slides. You saw the side view. This is kind of what you look at in the entrance of one of these systems. You can see that it's modular. And so if there's an issue with an individual cell or a different module, because of the modular design, you can easily just take out that module, replace the cell with a new functioning one, or replace the entire module if needed. Next slide. And then for the battery management system, it's for optimizing the battery performance and safety of the system. So the functionality will range from reporting the cell voltage measurements, temperature measurements, cell balancing, current limits, and fault detection. And those can be on multiple levels, starting with BMSs for the cells, which you can see in the cell interface there, BMSs for the modules and stacks of the switchgear, and then a control box, which all of the battery management systems will speak to each other. And the control box kind of says, hey, this is where the malfunctioning cell is or the module is, and it will either automatically cut that cell out, or it will notify an operator that something needs to be changed or that there's something wrong. Next slide. And finally, you have the power conversion system, which is the bidirectional conversion of electrical energy between the battery system, the grid, and or the load. So this changes the type of electricity from AC to DC, or changes the voltage type and the voltage level to a form that's easier to release back onto the grid. But that can be composed of capacitors, temperature sensors, and modules. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ray Strauss.
Thanks, Brendan. Again, I'm Ray Strauss with AMT, and I'm a principal consultant there, started in December. As Brendan showed you, all the components inside or subsystems inside, the final being the container. And as he mentioned earlier, the container is much more than just a container. There's fire detection and suppression systems, there are gas sensors, ventilation systems, temperature sensors, HVAC and temperature control. So there's a lot more besides that container and besides those other subcomponents that Brendan mentioned associated with this. Next. So also on these subsystems, and probably a lot of the exploded views you see, there's a lot of opportunity for subassembly and component suppliers out there. Part of the activity that's going on right now is people are looking for US content. They're looking to increase US content. A lot of incentives are based around the amount of US content. And while sometimes it's harder to get the cells at that point, it's much of the other content that can become domesticated. Customers out there are encouraged to do that. So you'll find things like fabricated metal enclosures and components, displays, touch panels, power cables, data cables, harnesses, bus bars, fuses, sensors, switches, as Brendan said, large capacitors, and numerous circuit board assemblies. And in New York State and the Southern Tier has capabilities in a lot of these things. and it already is an opportunity for a lot of people, but it could be an opportunity for more. Next slide. So other opportunities out there is more than just that system. There's opportunities for test equipment, testing and evaluation services. A big one that gets mentioned is the manufacturing equipment and automation, to get some of that coming from the US. Right now, it's extremely long lead time. And in most of the cell manufacturing, the equipment is not domestic equipment. There is some that's starting out, and we have some very good successful companies that have entered into it a bit. But I think there's a big opportunity there. There's opportunities for equipment service and maintenance, prototyping support, such as machining and fabrication. And again, the big one is what John mentioned earlier, is the recycling and reclaiming of the material. This batteries are brought into the US with all of their material content, but most of that material can be fully reclaimed. They can actually extract back out in the greater than 90% lithium grade or battery grade lithium from recycled batteries. So that is a big opportunity. There's also a lot of site opportunities, site commissioning, preparation and field engineering, installation services, just to name some of the opportunities. And with that, I will be passing it over to Carly.
Thanks, Ray. All right. So I am Carly Dupuis. I am a senior program manager with New York BESS, and on the supply chain team, my big function as of to date has been working on the supply chain database. So John mentioned it earlier, but we were putting together the supply chain database online resource that is for connecting customers to current manufacturers or suppliers and service providers in the battery and energy storage sector. And this is a program that is free registration for companies and access to users themselves. We are hosting it on the New York BESS website. There's a link there for it. Then you'll be provided the slides later, so you can go ahead and click on that. But it is ny-bess.org/page/NY BESS supply chain. And the registration for companies is open. We are anticipating that the online search will be later this month, and really excited about how many connections that this might bring to our manufacturers in the state and customers in the battery energy storage supply chain. Thanks for the next slide there. So the registration itself, when you go to that link, you're going to be presented with a page that kind of shows the requirements for registration. And basically, we're looking for, gathering some general info, your website and logo, figuring out who in your organization you want to be the administrative contact that'll be responsible for maintaining your listing on the page, and then also public contacts that you want to have be able to reach out to, your headquarters and additional New York locations, kind of a summary description of your business. And then also, this is how you'll be connecting with customers, is we're going to ask for your listing of your products and your services related to batteries and energy storage. And we've got a category guide set up that you'll choose from and kind of go through and pick lists, and that will be when customers search, they'll be searching through those categories. Additional information that's optional to provide is if you have certification documents, as far as like manufacturing certifications that you have adhered to, or listings for your products themselves, like a UL 1973 or something along those lines. And we're giving the option to update or to upload data sheets and listing pages as well to provide more detail. Okay, we can go down to the next slide. So this is kind of giving a snapshot of that page with the offerings, which is really the crux of the listing in the database. So when you come to this page, kind of back a little bit, first page is going to be more your contact information and whatnot, and that's listed as the overview. The third page is going to be the offerings here, and if you're a manufacturer, you would click on that you're a manufacturer, and you're going to be able to upload or put information in there about what products you're offering. on the page itself kind of gives you this category guide. So you would choose from there and then kind of go in a little modal window where you can add details about those specific products. Similar thing for services. All right, we can go to the next page. And then, as John mentioned, we're very close to launching the search pages on this, so I don't have screenshots to show on that. But as a customer, when they do come to the New York BESS database website, they would be able to search for your product or service, and searching by company names or keywords, searching in those product and service categories that we showed earlier. Also, we're going to do energy storage technology types, and there you could have different battery chemistries of cells and things along those lines. Give the option to search for if you want to look for a company that has achieved certain manufacturing standards and certifications, ownership types, if you're minority owned or veteran owned. And then we're trying to highlight New York locations to companies that have a presence in New York. Once a user goes and finds, companies that are of interest to them, they'll be able to select and click on the different links to the company pages. And there you'll have a nice company detail page where that'll display the information you've entered into the database. All the kind of more descriptive information. And then also we're going to provide a link to those customers to click on the main company contact and get an email sent directly to the company. And that is pretty much the gist of the supply chain database. I guess now we're going to hand it back over to Carol. Or Ray.
Or both.
Or
Or
both.
both.
You know.
Exactly. Tupers.
So we're
Please,
tag
Ray.
teaming on this one. So what assistance can the NENY supply chain help with? We can assist with helping you access your manufacturing and technical capabilities and what synergies those might have to potential opportunities in the supply chain. We can help you with identifying gaps, as well as transition plans, like if you want to expand your product offering or make something a little bit different that fits better into the supply chain for this industry. We can help with that, as well as help with expansion plans. And one of the other things that we can do a lot of is, as we see and visit a lot of companies and understand their capabilities, we can also help with connecting businesses to fill needs and gaps and connect opportunities, but not only connect businesses with opportunities that are like business opportunities, but as Carol will review some of the rest of these, we can help point people in the right direction to connect them with other opportunities.
Great. Thanks, Ray. So then the next area is workforce resources and training programs. So there are traditional resources available today to manufacturers that we want to take advantage of, as well as some new and specific resources having to do with NENY. As an example, some of those things is Broome Tioga Workforce is currently conducting manufacturing boot camps to train production-ready employees. They also offer on-the-job training and upskilling funds, so that's a resource that's currently available. There's also SUNY Broome and SUNY Corning Community College, who offers training programs and funding. That there are 2 significant grant programs that are flexible and cover almost any kind of training and are easy to do. That's something else that manufacturers can take advantage of. There's a Binghamton University as well as RIT that have resources in regards to interns or graduates. Both of them, both RIT and Binghamton University, are part of Handshake, which is a platform for students and employers to make connections. Also, there, as a part of NENY, the workforce group is rolling out a battery academy that is currently running a pilot. It's anticipated that this program will be available in September and will be offered at no cost for the duration of the grant. And that will include training for battery technicians and battery experts, which will be a great resource for folks entering into the market. As regards to funding and grant assistance, there are currently funding available, as I said, through Workforce. We also have consulting grant programs that are available for helping organizations pivot, transition from a technical standpoint, from a business standpoint, from a marketing standpoint. We can serve those needs. Depending on location, need, investment, and impact, there's various other incentives programs that drive growth, whether that's at the city, county, regional, or state economic development levels. We can also, as Ray said, we can bring the right partners to the tables and help navigate through that process, because it can be quite convoluted sometimes, and we want to be able to take out and demystify that. There's also elements that are part of both the federal infrastructure and in the Inflation Reduction Act that support clean energy and climate change. We intend on holding a webinar, hopefully in the near future, that will provide more clarity on the incentives that are available through both of those programs, because there's significant investments that are being made. There's also internships that are possibilities, as I said, through Binghamton University and RIT. Also, NYSERDA offers paid internships as part of the New York State Clean Energy Internship Program, which can cover almost 90% of the interns' wages for the companies that qualify. It's a pretty simple process to go through that. And then there's a number of technical resources that we have available to us as well. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to John Cerveny again.
Great. Thank you, Carol, Ray, rest of the team. So my role is right now is to talk more about some of the resources and ecosystem partners available across the state. So one of the things that New York BEST has done in our 13 years of existence is to help identify needs in terms of the batteries ecosystem and help to fill those needs. And so we work very closely with partners, including Empire State Development and in particular NYSERDA, to help stand up some resources in the state that are very specific and very much needed to help build out this resource, this set of resources. You see listed here a number of them that are up and have been running for some time. The Battery Prototyping Center at RIT up in Rochester allows people to have commercial quality cells made. So if they've invented some special material and they want to have cells made for them in a commercial format, they can go there and work with the staff and get scheduled and have access to that facility. And then just across town at the Battery Testing Commercialization Center, which is a facility that New York BEST actually built, and it's operated for us by DNV. That is a place that is an accredited lab for testing, where you can do from coin cells up to packs the size that fit into buses, testing of cells and components and models to get certified test reports. Brookhaven National Lab down on Long Island has the National Synchrotron Light Source beam line, which allows for some really advanced in operando testing. So where you can actually operate a cell and see what's going on inside it simultaneously. It's one of only a couple places in the country that kind of testing can be done. The state of New York made a significant investment to have a beam line available there for battery tests. This next bullet could be a couple of pages of its own. The universities across our state have very strong programs. Whether you start in Binghamton with the home of the Nobel Prize laureate from 2019, Stan Whittingham, and his Nobel Prize for inventing the lithium battery, all of the research components and facilities that are available at Binghamton. That's an incredible resource right in the southern tier. But similarly, there are resources across the state at places like Cornell, University of Buffalo, RIT, RPI, and then down in the city, NYU, Columbia, all have really strong efforts and programs, City University of New York as well. So we have some great activities and resources as another piece of the attraction to why you would want to do business in New York State if you're in the battery business. Up in Rochester, Kodak, 100 years of coating materials onto films. Turns out that those same capabilities are extremely valuable and useful in the world of batteries. So they have a lot of activity and investment there. And then the last bullet, again, this could also be pages of information about the resources that are private companies, such as the Intertech and their battery testing lab in Cortland. There are many available resources that really support the story and round out the ecosystem here. So I think, this is the point in the presentation where, we've kind of made the case that New York is a great place, and I'm happy to have the team come in and join here on next steps, but there will be additional webinars coming. Carol mentioned the IRA incentives. That's one that's challenging to decipher, to be honest. The rules in some ways are still being written, but we're working hard to identify someone who will be able to be our guide through those incentives and to get the right information out to all of you about how to qualify. We encourage everyone listening to be part of the supply chain database. And again, these slides will be distributed so you can click through on that and get yourself in there. And then finally, feel free to reach out to the team. We are here really to help make this happen and to help you find your path to hopefully being a part of the supply chain for energy storage and batteries. The state, we weren't, the chart I showed earlier that showed the East Coast and all of the dots that have been put down, New York wasn't necessarily first in the nation to have some gigafactories announced, although we have 2 now, but there are more to come. And so that piece of the story, that battery production side, we see great opportunities in the state. And for, at present with our team, we've already identified really strong opportunities when we look at the energy storage system side of this equation. And so we've got a lot to offer as a state, and we also think we can make connections for companies who are already here to help move that along and produce the results that we kind of all signed up to when we made our proposal to EDA and got the funding for New Energy New York. So with that, I think we're at the Q&A part.
Excellent. Thank you, John. It is an exciting time for the Southern Tier. I think this is a kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it's wonderful to have the support of Binghamton University and Dr. Stan Whittingham as the crown jewel and rock star for lithium ion batteries. So we're all very proud of that. We do have one question in the chat or in the Q&A, and the question is, will flow battery manufacturers and system developers have access to these resources? So thank you for that question.
Yeah.
John, would you like to take that?
Sure, and the answer is emphatically yes. The focus of Battery New York is lithium cells, the component of New Energy New York that is that production center. The focus of the supply chain and really all of the pieces around that is much broader. And so system level focus is, there are common elements across systems regardless of the core sort of battery technology. And flow batteries absolutely fit in the in our theme of building out a resource that is inclusive and covers things like enclosures, battery management systems, power conversion systems. Those would have applicability. Sometimes voltages are different depending on the chemistry, on the technology, things like that. But frankly, that's probably it's certainly not a showstopper. It's something that we would work to support in any case. So absolutely yes.
And we have the next question is, what role does testing play in the supply chain? Yeah,
I can take a swing at that as well. That's testing is one of the pieces that gives people assurance that things do what they've been represented to do, right? So it's one thing for a manufacturer to put out a data sheet that says, here's what it is. It's different than to have a certified test report from an accredited lab, say, to look at and to share with your investors or to to give a manufacturer comfort that what they've bought actually does what it was represented to do. So testing is a vital resource. It was one of the first things that New York Best really spent time on and helped get the money together to build the test lab, knowing that having quality testing capabilities that were accessible for batteries and for battery systems was really an important piece of the ecosystem here.
Great, John. John, you're going to get a third one in a row too. This one is, do you have to be a member of New York Best to be included in the supply chain database? Carly might be able to answer
Carly
this.
can take this.
Yeah, I can field that one. No, you do not have to be a member of New York Best to be included in the supply chain database. You just have to be offering a product or service that falls into one of those categories of something applicable to battery energy storage. There are a few things that would filter you out. We aren't accepting companies that are headquartered in countries of concern as of deemed by the U.S. Department of State. It's basically, China, Russia, Cuba, those. And then we are not accepting manufacturers' representatives to be listed in the supply chain database as a organization themselves, but we do encourage manufacturers to register, and then if they choose to list their representatives as a contact under that, we can accept them that way.
Thank you, Carly.
Sure.
So we have a question from Jeff Smith, and when will Li-Cycle be ready to recycle batteries? Rotary has a relationship with Redwood Materials for recycling. So when will Li-Cycle be ready to recycle batteries? Ray, would you like to take that?
Yeah, so we visited them, and my understanding, and they're well underway on this factory, but there's two parts to recycling batteries. The first part kind of strips the battery apart, separates the plastic, the foils, and ultimately what ends up getting left is ground into what they then will deem as being black mass. And they have a number of those facilities throughout the States and as well as in Europe. This facility will be the second facility will be the first facility that actually takes that black mass gathered from all over the United States, and some being brought in, and actually convert it back into raw materials. Again, they're well under construction. My understanding is they were targeting to begin commissioning in later 2024, and probably not be generating battery grade lithium until 25. And I will ask Brendan and John if that makes sense to what they believe they understood as well. Yeah,
It does, right? I believe that's the schedule they've announced as well. So it's what Ray just described is they have two different types of facilities, a spoke and a hub. Spoke is where you collect all of the batteries of various kinds, whether it's from a power tool or from an EV, and it comes into the spoke facility, and that's where it gets separated into constituent materials, and then what's left is this black mass. The black mass is what then goes to the hub facility, which is what they're building in Rochester, nearly $1 billion investment, and that's the one that will start to go live in 2024 and along that timeline. That's just a critical part of when you look broadly at U.S. domestic capability on batteries, having that recycling capability here, so that wherever a battery started its journey, if it gets to the U.S. and gets to one of those recycling facilities, it now becomes domestic material. And so that's a really important piece of the story for all of us going forward on how we have enough materials to make batteries and to do it here.
Yeah, they identified
It's exciting that it's happening in Rochester, frankly. It's a good thing.
They identify themselves as they believe they will be the largest supplier of lithium when they're out there. The other interesting thing, we met with their vice president, who is a brilliant guy that has run mines all over the world. And the exciting part to him was that they're not inventing anything new. They're just stringing it together. The processes to take the black mass and extract the first material out of it are known processes, and what's left, they move to the next process that's a known process. So their confidence of success is really, really high.
I'd just like to stress the fact that while their extraction of battery grade materials might not begin until 2025, the production of black mass currently is in effect, and they're continuing this operation up until they can extract those materials.
Good point.
Thank you. We have another question, and it says, at first glance, it appears that the supplier categories are for materials, existing technologies, and for off-the-shelf parts. Are there forecasts for custom parts / products?
Most, I think what I've seen out there is most of the deployments are pretty custom. You know, what one company does for a battery energy storage system doesn't, you know, it has similarities, but all the parts that make it up are generally a little bit unique and custom to that. So there is a lot of customization out there. While some component level things are going to be standardized, you're going to find a lot of new applications for a lot of the components and parts that we have shown out there.
Yeah, and I think even though it's one title in the database, the diversity within that title is going to be wide.
Yeah, but one other thing to point out about what our team can help with in the database, and we do a presentation on large scale grid energy storage, but really any of those applications we're here to help, you know. So whether or not it's you know, mobility or any other applications tied to the DoD or anything, our role is to help support those organizations.
Yeah.
Excellent. And there also is an element of this question that says, for me, is other technologies. And, you know, the database, I believe, the intention will be to continue to evolve and add categories and add different technologies to it over time. So I don't know if you want to speak to that, John or Carly.
Yeah, I think that you're totally right with that, Carol, that there is the intention to let it be flexible and grow over time. At this point, we have set up, you know, we've tried to pretty well define the hierarchies of categories as we know it to date, and have in there different energy storage technology types that you can choose from, but also added the other category in the sections as well, to be able to list something that, you know, maybe isn't falling into what's shown on there. And we at New York BESS will be reviewing what's going into the database on a regular basis and seeing if there are trends and things that hadn't captured in the original listings that we want to add into it. And John, if you had anything else to add.
No, that's a great answer. And I'm just going to circle back a little bit to that question about whether things are custom or off the shelf kind of parts. And you know, I think Ray, you hit it on the head with everybody builds something a little different up to now. So those, you know, as we were putting together this presentation and looking for good examples, we had our choice of dozens of different things we could have portrayed as being part of this. So, you know, we kind of centered on one set around stationary storage, and particularly, you know, one manufacturer shows in a lot of those slides because they had good pictures available. And so there's a lot more out there. And you think about injection molding and the different types of components that could be part of a system, all of the metal components. There's a huge variety that goes on, and across application spaces, that variety is even greater. So if it's a system that's going into a drone, it's going to have a lot different components set in it than one that goes for a stationary storage, you know, megawatt scale device. It's going to be lighter for one thing. But, yeah.
Excellent. We have a couple more minutes if anyone else has any questions. Or if there's any comments from the panel of anything we didn't touch on that you think would be important for folks to know.
I guess I just always say, you know, help us spread the word. Thanks for joining us today and hearing this story and hopefully finding a way to connect in for yourself. There's other people you know who you think should hear this and should recognize the opportunity. Please, you know, point them our way, and we're always happy to talk to people and share the news about what's going on here. Because it really is, you know, fundamentally, this is just transformational. We're changing the way the world uses energy, and batteries have a really important role in that, whether it's for the electric grid or for transportation. And so the size and scale of this opportunity is a little bit hard to wrap your head around. You know, but only about maybe 15% of the capacity that's needed in the world by 2030 is built today. So a lot of those projections are announcements. You know, someone said we're going to break ground and build a factory. It's not built yet. And so there's a whole lot of activity yet to happen, people to be trained and hired, material to be procured, and then systems to be built. The world of 2030 will look a lot different from where we are today with all of this.
And I think so much of the work that we've seen that's needed is we're good at it today, right? There's many things that we have a real great industrial base that can do the energy storage elements that can be built on, and slight pivoting can make a huge difference.
Right.
Any other comments from the panel? Great. Thank you to the panel. It was excellent. You guys are amazing, and for informative presentation on the battery energy storage supply chain opportunities. This webinar will be recorded and will be available on our website. We look forward to conducting more of these webinars in the future to share information and progress and incentives and funding opportunities, because I think that's going to be a real pivotal, important point of the initiative. Please feel free, as John said, to contact us at any time. We are here to help. That's what our mission is. And thank you for joining us today.